Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On this episode, I'm going to discuss BDSM and sensory deprivation, what it is, to the types there are, why we do it, and more. So, what is sensory deprivation? Sensory deprivation refers to the lack of sensory stimulation, either by natural causes, in cases of removing sight, for example, or restricting sound, or in somatosensory settings, removing touch and feeling. Somatosensory function is the ability for us to interpret bodily sensation. Sensation can take any number of forms for us, including touch, pressure on our skin, the vibrations we feel under our feet, the temperature outside, that itch, a tickle, or even the pain we feel. The somatosensory system allows us to interpret sensory messages received from our body and consists of sensory receptors located in and under the skin, inside of our tissues, our joints, and these nerve cells, tracts that are inside of the body in our spinal cord and all the way connecting to our brain, centers that process and modulate incoming sensory information. As senses are removed, a certain sexual tension has been demonstrated in clinical trials to heighten sexual arousal among its participants. Because we are no longer able to feed, touch, or engage with our partners while they are in control, our minds have to begin to fill in the experience from memory or recreate something new in fantasy. This sends our synaptic nerves into overdrive. Since the amygdala controls our sexual arousal, which is near our hypothalamus, and is responsible for alerting us to changes in our environment detected by our senses. When we remove this, we see this process really begin to heat up as an exchange and lack of sensation moves forward. Because our limbic system, which encircles the upper end of our spinal cord right below the cortical hemispheres of our brain, it plays a crucial role in regulating our emotions and our sexual behaviors. Stimulation of parts of the limbic system can produce sexual arousal and even be completely elevated as we start to remove or restrict our sensation of touch. When you remove this sense, your mind is left filling the spaces with what's going on. You may be able to hear but not feel, or watch but not hear or feel. Our bodies and our other senses become elevated as they produce responses, or we even know them as ghost responses, and interpret those into pleasurable ones. It's hard to say for each person what might be or is the best sense to remove. This is why experimentation with a trusted partner is and could be fun and inventive. When it comes to the visual aspect of sensory deprivation, we have to understand one thing. Human beings are visual creatures. It's part of the world we live in. We see things that we try to understand and categorize them in our mind. Because sight helps us navigate the world that we live in. It helps us make sense of our reality. It becomes one of the senses that most people often turn to when involved with deprivation play. When we engage in any romantic or sexual activity with a partner, we're taking all of them in. All of them. And think about that for a moment. When a woman is looking at a man and he's got his broad shoulders and his chest is heaving and he may or may not have a six-pack, we're watching this and interpreting it as it elevates our sexual mood. For men, we might be watching how our partner's breasts are heaving or how their thighs are moving backwards and forwards. Again, this visual representation adds to the overall stimulation in our mind. One thing that we need to remember is that we're watching how they move, how they breathe, what they look like. We're starting to see that sweat, those little beads form on their body, and so much more. When we remove this sense, our minds fill in with our own visuals. We start to live our own fantasies in real time with our trusted partner. Visual deprivation comes in many forms as well. Blindfolds become the traditional, scarves, even a hand, and so on. When your sight is restricted, you begin to really focus on the actions at hand, the sensations you feel, and how you're interpreting them. Because you may not see that spank coming or that flogger or cat o' nine tails bearing down on you in the next moment, you are just in the moment with your partner. Another aspect that's not as often thought of, and it has so many variables, is sound. Listening to rock music might keep you extremely motivated during your workout, but have you ever thought about bringing that into your bedroom and how that might result in even hotter sex or a hotter intensive study and scene between you and your partner? There was a study published in the Journal of Media Psychology that found when couples listen to music with suggestive or explicit sexual lyrics, they find their partner more appealing. Go figure, right? A researcher, though, had conducted studies on sexually explicit songs and how they sexually charged the environment, more so than songs that weren't. Makes sense, right? I've written on this subject before, pondering what songs people may use or listen to during a scene or even at a local dungeon. When you listen to a song that puts you in the mood with someone, especially when you're attracted to them, the lyrics make you focus favorably on their physical attributes, enhancing attraction. Because you are both following the rhythm, listening to those beats. Think about it when you are out dancing and your body's synchronized to the beats of the music, and from there how things heat up. However, removing sound is also quite interesting. We have to fill our minds with what our partners may or may not be saying to us if we can't hear them. If they're using an electric stimulation wand, for example, and we can't hear the crackling of it before it's placed in our skin and know how we're going to respond. It's then elevated when we start to feel that electric sensation. Sound, or lack thereof, can heighten our sexual connectivity quite intensively given the circumstances. So, we've looked at the first couple. We've thought about touch, sound. What happens though when we look at the two and it comes to taste and smell? There are a wide variety of theories of how much smell and taste are linked. For a little bit of the science, there are no definite empirical studies that prove, if any, real number exists. You will often hear people on TV and newspapers quote numbers between 75% to 95% of what we taste comes down to smell. The reality of this is, though, we just don't know. What we do know, though, is taste and smell do play a big part in our lives. When it comes to our sexuality, your taste buds are busy all day detecting sweet, salty, bitter, and sour flavors in our food, and what we drink, in the air we breathe. But they don't quit just because we get involved in sex. Think about when you exchange a very deep, passionate, wet kiss with your partner. Your taste buds are picking up on the taste of his or her lips, the saliva that you can feel, and the latter of which can intensify your arousal between the two of you. You can play with taste during sex by sucking on a lollipop, for example, giving yourself that sweet, sugary taste in your mouth, or spicing it up with some edible lube. So you're altering the chemical sensations that you're both tasting and experiencing during your sexual or play BDSM encounter. You love your partner's scent, right? That unique natural odor which is most potent when they first wake up, especially for men, and more so in the morning, or they haven't showered yet. Did you know smell is known for its power of association, but there are subtler biological factors at play? There was some research recently done and published in the UK that found when couples dig into each other's scent, their bodies are subconsciously responding to the other's dissimilar immune systems. So, because the two aren't linked, there actually is a chemical draw to want to link them together, to make the next immune system even stronger, which definitely appears to signal reproductive compatibility. This could be because offspring born to couples with dissimilar immune systems may be better equipped to fend off more diseases. Sexy, right? So during sex, simply taking a whiff of your partner can boost your libido. It can raise that drive. The more you take in their scent, the way they smell, especially during or after orgasm, pre-orgasm, the more that sex drive begins to grow. You can also stimulate your sniffer by inhaling other types of scent. There's been studies that have conducted by the Smell and Taste Treatment, a research foundation in Chicago, for example, that found various scents such as lavender, pumpkin pie, cups of coffee, gasoline, if you can believe it, revs the libido of both men and women. Think about when we go into or we see all those movies and they're lighting candles, especially scented candles, before they're going to have their big dramatic sex scene, right? Well, there is something to that. Odor in the room, or even giving somebody a rub down with some scented oils, does heighten our sexual tension and chemistry. So the one thing that we have to keep in mind, especially when we're getting involved in sensory deprivation, is there are safety factors. Sensory deprivation requires great care, as removing the senses can be dangerous at times. There's always an inherent risk, and we have to keep risk in mind in any activity we do inside of the BDSM lifestyle. For example, touch restrictions that prevent a submissive from moving can compromise their circulation. For somebody who may have circulatory problems, this could be an issue. Some sensory deprivation suits, for example, can be suffocating. So, for example, using a hood or a bag or even a latex suit to remove scent. This could be especially troubling for someone who someone who suffers from claustrophobia. Also, when you think of these latex suits, sometimes latex can cause allergies, even though they're being used to enhance our sensory play. The dominant should be the one to monitor their submissive carefully to make sure they're safe throughout sensory deprivation play. But one thing through and through is when you're talking about doing any of these types, as with all types of BDSM activities, is negotiating and talking about any conditions you might have, whether they be psychological, emotional, behavioral, when you get involved in these types of plays. For someone who has a fear of the dark, which is something real, maybe depriving them of sight isn't going to be the right move. Submissives and dominants both need and can enact a safe word if they want the play to stop. We understand, obviously, BDSM revolves completely around consent. However, the dominant needs to pay explicit attention and to stop the play if the submissive's mental or physical safety becomes compromised. Sensory deprivation is a fun and inexpensive way to explore and host a new range of BDSM activities. While starting off and restricting more than one may not be the best way to go in the beginning, you don't want to dive straight into the deep end. Exploring and having fun with your trusted partner is definitely a stimulating and exciting new way to enhance your rotation of BDSM scenes on a regular basis. And you have to consider that a lot of the times, if we're masochists and all we are doing is getting involved in pain activities, which there's nothing wrong if you're a sadist, changing it up can actually enable and enhance the types of play that we then continue doing later. Because our mind becomes conditioned like anything else to accept what we're constantly doing at the same level with the same person. Right? We get to know the person that we're with, so the expectation of what they're about to do, whether it's a spanking, whether it's breath play. When we change up our types of play inside of the BDSM scene, such as bringing in elements of sensory deprivation, we allow ourselves to grow in a sphere we may or may not even have been comfortable with prior. Especially if we've had experiences with those we didn't fully trust, so we didn't fully enjoy the experience. Sometimes you need to try something new with someone you trust just to see if it's going to heighten the next level of play you get back into. Now, in the coming weeks, I'm going to be hosting some new, hopefully, interviews with people regarding different things, from those who are involved in AA, for example, and are still involved in the scene. Because I spoke recently about the issue of, on my last podcast anyways, I spoke about the issue of getting involved in the scene and using substances during play. I'm also going to be talking with others about, in the coming weeks, about needles and their effect, knife and edge play. So there's a lot more coming up on the kink perspective. Bear in mind, or just bear with me, and I'll make my announcement on my social media pages. As far as let me close here for sensory deprivation. It's something that's in my bag. I enjoy doing it. It's a great way, especially the more you do it with someone you care and trust, the more fun you can have. Because you're elevating their senses and their reactions, you're heightening yours. And that sexual tension between the two of you is very palpable. Consider it the next time, look into it, find a workshop and try it out. Until next time, be safe, stay kinky.